movie Oppenheimer now out, let's take a look back at the destructive nature of the nuclear bomb. Hello everyone and welcome back to our channel. I'm your host Emily, and today we're counting down our list of the top 10 terrifying truths about Hiroshima schools are hiding from you. Number 10. The nuclear shadows. For those of you who don't know, on the 6th and 9th of August 1945, the United States detonated 2 atomic bombs over the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, respectively. The aerial bombings together ended the lives of between 129,000 and 226,000 people, mostly of whom were civilians, and remained the only use of nuclear weapons in an armed conflict. Now, for all the people who lost their lives, only a nuclear shadow remained. The bomb detonated at 1,900 feet above the city center of Hiroshima. The subsequent explosion caused temperatures of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit to annihilate nearly everything within 1,600 feet of the bomb's blast zone. Almost anything and anyone within a mile was destroyed. The bomb's light and heat were so extreme that they bleached the city's exposed surfaces, except in places where an unsuspecting person shielded the building or sidewalk or bridge from the blast with their own body in their final moments alive. It's truly disturbing that people were just enjoying their lives and it was gone in an instant, and that you can physically see that with the shadows. Number 9. Radioactive black rain fell. The Hiroshima fireball was 1,200 feet in diameter with a surface temperature of 10,000 degrees Fahrenheit. The intense heat evaporated large volumes of water in the city, sucked up as if it were a tornado, scientist Shizu Sudo wrote. Water vapor rose into the sky and cooled, precipitating around soot and other debris. Radioactive rain started falling roughly 30 minutes after the detonation and lasted for a few hours. The downpour extended over large areas, roughly 11 by 19 kilometers. The possibility exists that the black rain included the most fallout, 2/3 of the nuclear radiation energy, Sudo said, although a 2014 study found no apparent long-term health effects from the black rain exposure. Number 8. Deaths. Small rescue parties soon began to operate, but roughly half the city's population was dead or injured. In those areas most seriously affected, virtually no one escaped serious injury. The numerous small fires that erupted simultaneously all around the city soon merged into one large firestorm, creating extremely strong winds that blew towards the center of the fire. The firestorm eventually engulfed 4.4 square miles of the city, ending the lives of anyone who had not escaped in the first minutes after the attack. One post-war study of the victims of Hiroshima found that less than 4.5% of survivors suffered leg fractures. Such injuries were not uncommon, it was just that most who could not walk were engulfed by the firestorm. No one will ever know for certain how many died as a result of the attack on Hiroshima, and some 70,000 people probably died as a result of initial blast, heat, and radiation effects. Now, this included about 20 American airmen being held as prisoners in the city, and by the end of 1945, because of the lingering effects of radioactive fallout and other after effects, the Hiroshima death toll was probably over 100,000. The 5-year death total may have reached or exceeded 200,000 as cancer and other long-term effects took hold. Number 7. Aftermath. People farther from the point of detonation experienced the first flash and heat, followed second later by a deafening boom and the blast wave. Nearly every structure within 1 mile of ground zero was destroyed, and almost every building within 3 miles was damaged. Less than 10% of the buildings in the city survived without any damage, and the blast wave shattered glass in suburbs 12 miles away. The most common first reaction of those that were indoors, even miles from ground zero, was that their building had just suffered a direct hit by a bomb. Number 6. Oppenheimer. In 1942, Oppenheimer was recruited to work on the Manhattan Project, and in 1943 he was appointed director of the Project Los Alamos Laboratory in New Mexico, tasked with developing the first nuclear weapons. His leadership and scientific expertise were instrumental in the project's success. On July 16, 1945, he was present at the first test of the atomic bomb, Trinity. In August 1945, the weapons were used against Japan in the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only use of nuclear weapons in an armed conflict. Now, the real-life J. Robert Oppenheimer never directly said he regretted creating the atomic bomb, nor did he formally apologize for it, even though he was burdened by how it was used once it was out of his control. Oppenheimer reportedly fell into a depression after he saw the imminent impact of his creation had both on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, believing that the second bombing was unnecessary and excessive. Oppenheimer expressed his concerns about the use of the bomb once it was out of his hands, but he did not once say he regretted inventing the weapon of mass destruction. Number 5. Why Hiroshima? The name Hiroshima is so tied to the atomic bomb that it's hard to imagine there were other possible targets. But in early 1945, the US was still months away from building its first bomb and certainly didn't know what to hit. Should it be a city? Should it be a military installation? These are questions that were yet to be decided, says Alex Wellerstein, a historian at the Stevens Institute of Technology. Wellerstein has devoted his career to studying nuclear weapons and the decision to use them. He says that in the spring of 1945, the military convened a target committee, a mix of officers and scientists, to decide where the bomb should fall. The minutes of this committee were declassified years ago, and they show it considered some far less deadly targets. The initial list included a remote military installation and Tokyo Bay, where the bomb would have been detonated as a demonstration. But the target committee decided that those options wouldn't show the world the power of the new bomb. The target committee decided that a bomb had to end people's lives. At the time, American bombers were already firebombing many cities, ending the lives of tens of thousands. So they decided this bomb would not just end lives, it would be something biblical. One bomb from one plane would wipe a city off the map. It would be horrible, but they wanted it to be horrible to end the war and try to stop the future of nuclear bombs. They chose Hiroshima as Hiroshima is compact, Wellerstein says. If you put a bomb like this in the middle of it, you end up destroying almost the entirety of the city. Also, Hiroshima was a real military target. There were factories and other facilities there. Number 4. Survivor story. Amiko Oka was 2.8 kilometers away when the bomb went off. When speaking of the experience, she said, "I was 8 when the bomb dropped. My older sister was 12. She left early that morning to work on a building demolition site and never came home. My parents searched for her for months and months. They never found her remains. My parents refused to send an obituary notice until the day they died in hopes that she was healthy and alive somewhere, somehow. She was affected by the radiation and vomited profusely after the bomb attack. My hair fell out, my gums bled, and I was too ill to attend school. My grandmother lamented the suffering of her children and grandchildren and prayed, 'How cruel, how so very cruel, if it only weren't for the atomic bomb.' This was a stock phrase of hers until the day she died. The war was caused by many selfish misdeeds of adults, and many children fell victims because of it. Alas, it is still the case today. Us adults must do everything we can to protect the lives and dignity of our children." Number 3. Orphans. When the United States dropped the atomic bomb on the city of Hiroshima, up to 6,500 children were estimated to have been instantly orphaned. They were forced to make it on their own in a city of ruins, struggling against hunger and loneliness. Without parents, they had to fend for themselves. They stole to get by. They were taken in by the wrong adults, and they were later bought and sold by said adults. Orphans who grew up in Hiroshima harbor a special hatred for grown-ups, and one survivor was sent to an orphanage but says it never felt like home. He was beaten and bullied, and he says he felt completely isolated. People would say terrible things to me like, "We're the only reason you're still alive, you orphan." Hearing things like that was the hardest part. Number 2. Long-term effects. Within the first few months after the bombing, it is estimated by Radiation Effects Research Foundation, cooperative Japan-US organization, that between 90,000 and 166,000 people died in Hiroshima. These deaths include those who died due to the force and excruciating heat of the explosions, as well as deaths caused by acute radiation exposure. Now, these numbers represent imprecise estimates due to the fact that it is unknown how many forced laborers and military personnel were present in the city, and that in many cases, entire families died, leaving no one to report the deaths. Along the long-term effects suffered by the atomic bomb survivors, the most deadly was leukemia. An increase in leukemia appeared about 2 years after the attacks and peaked around 4 to 6 years later. Children represent the population population that was affected the most severely. For all other cancers, the increase did not appear until around 10 years after the attacks. The increase was first noticed in 1956, and soon after, tumor registries were started in both Hiroshima and Nagasaki to collect data on the excess cancer risk caused by the radiation exposure. Today, most of the generation that was alive during the attacks has passed away, and now much more attention has turned to the children born to the survivors. Regarding individuals who have been exposed to radiation before birth in utero, studies such as one led by E. Nakashima in 1944 have shown that exposure led to increase in small head size and mental disability, as well as impairment in physical growth. And coming in at number 1 is Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park. Hiroshima Peace Memorial Park is a memorial park in the center of Hiroshima, Japan. It is dedicated to the legacy of Hiroshima as the first city in the world to suffer a nuclear attack at the end of World War II, and the memories of the bomb's direct and indirect victims. The park was built on an open field that was created by the explosion. Today, there are a number of memorials and monuments, museums, and lecture halls which draw over 1 million visitors annually. Now, the Peace Flame is another monument to the victims of the bomb that destroyed Hiroshima, but it has an additional symbolic purpose. The flame has been burned continuously since it was lit in 1964 and will remain lit until all nuclear bombs on the planet are destroyed and the planet is free from the threat of nuclear annihilation. Now, unfortunately, I think this flame could burn forever because some of us humans love weapons of mass destruction. Well, that's all for our list of the top 10 terrifying truths about Hiroshima schools are hiding from you. Did any of these facts shock you? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe. I'm your host, Emily, and we'll see you next time. Peace.